Those who are apologists for Israel's mass slaughter of Gaza, one of the great crimes of our age, know they have no moral high ground. Deep down, at least. As tens of thousands are slaughtered, over 14,000 of them Palestinian children, as many more are maimed, the vast majority displaced, and of course traumatised, with a never-ending litany of war crimes as Gaza is essentially wiped from the face of the earth. So all they've got is deflections, smears, distortion, outright shameless lies. Now, this is a point I've been making all the way through this obscenity, but it is worth repeating, which brings me to the latest victim of those who are as morally disgraced as they are shameless. It was the Oscars this weekend, and Jonathan Glazer is the director of The Zone of Interest, a new German language film based on the Martin Amis novel about the Nazi commandant Rudolf Höss and his wife who lived near Auschwitz concentration camp, where around 1 million of the 6 million total Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust were exterminated. Now, the film has rave reviews, it won an Oscar, and so Glazer took to the stage for his acceptance speech. Now, Glazer, importantly, is Jewish. His ancestors were Jews who fled Ukraine and Bessarabia, a former region in Eastern Europe, which straddles modern-day Moldovan Ukraine. They fled, of course, the horrible, vicious anti-Semitism that existed. On the stage with him were the producers Len Blavatnik and James Wilson, both also Jewish. Wilson himself last month said publicly, there's obviously things going on in the world in Gaza that remind us starkly of the sort of selective empathy that there seems to be groups of innocent people being killed that we care about less than other innocent people. Well, indeed. Now, let's just hear what Jonathan Glazer...
Thank you so much. I'm going to read, I'm afraid. Thank you to the Academy for this honour, and to our partners A24, Film 4 Access and the Polish Film Institute, to the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum for their trust and guidance, to my producers, actors, collaborators. All our choices were made to reflect and confront us in the present, not to say, look what they did then, rather look what we do now. Our film shows where dehumanisation leads at its worst. It shaped all of our past and present. Right now, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people. Whether the victims of October the 7th in Israel or the ongoing attack on Gaza, all are victims of this dehumanization. How do we resist? Alexandra Bistron Kaladziejczak, the girl who glows in the film as she did in life, chose to. I dedicate this to her memory and her resistance. Thank you.
Firstly, I think the reception there is striking. Whoops and cheers. Now, there is a culture of fear and silence about speaking out over this atrocity, but you can see that despite all that, strong opposition to Israel's onslaught permeates the very elite of the arts. I would also note that he didn't just mention those slaughtered in Gaza, but also the victims of October the 7th. That didn't protect him from the bad faith smears which came his way. So what happened next? Well, unsurprisingly, Glazer was targeted. And what those people who targeted him did is lie about him, maliciously so. Batya Ungar Sargon is the opinion editor of Newsweek, admittedly a publication which in practice has stopped being a credible news outlet and is now just some weird hard-right rag. She tweeted, I simply cannot fathom the moral rot in someone's soul that leads them to win an award for a movie about the Holocaust and then with the platform given to them to accept that award by saying, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness. Now, what I find amazing, even though she works for some rag, she's supposed to be a journalist. What she wrote there is a straightforward case of lie by omission. Glazer didn't say, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness. He said, right now we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people. It's completely and utterly different from what she's claimed. That tweet is still up. How shameless is that? Now, the community note feature of Twitter is hit and miss, but she did get community noted, explaining the quote has been shortened and displayed out of context. It's just incredible behaviour. Then there's John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary, a magazine I studied at length in my postgraduate studies when I was researching the rise of the US right. It shifted from being a supposedly left of centre publication to playing a pivotal role in the rise of US neoconservatism. He tweeted, by saying he refutes his Jewishness on the biggest stage in the world 5 months after the attack on Israel, Jonathan Glazer has instantly made himself into one of Judaism's historical villains. How shameless can you get? It's just lying. just flagrant lying, dishonesty, in order to justify a truly hideous claim against someone, describing the Jewish director of an Oscar-winning film about the Holocaust as one of Judaism's historical villains because he opposes a terrible injustice which kills so many innocent people, in which he specifically spoke about those killed, including Israelis. Now, let's look at the Anti-Defamation League in the US, which supposedly exists to fight anti-Semitism, but as you can see here in practice conflates that with uncritical support for the state of Israel. It tweeted, Israel is not hijacking Judaism or the Holocaust by defending itself against genocidal terrorists. Glazer's comments at the Oscars are both factually incorrect and morally reprehensible. They minimise the Shoah and excuse terrorism of the most heinous kind. While Israel's Minister of Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism, Amichai Chikli, a member of the ruling Likud party, said, and I'm sorry to have to read it out because it's actually off the charts vile, this. Glazer was the next useful idiot who stuck a knife into the back of his people and in the backs of women who were raped and then shot in the head afterwards, in children who were slaughtered in their beds, in entire families who were burned alive. There was no forgiving such vile types, auto-anti-Semitic Jews from Judith Butler until last night's idiot, but there's no reason to get excited over the phenomenon. It has accompanied us for generations. It's just worth absorbing that for a minute. Glazer firstly spoke about the victims of 7th of October in his speech, suggesting he stuck a knife in the backs of fellow Jews and those killed in atrocities committed that day. I mean, frankly, his violent imagery is just beyond appalling, because he opposes, to quote back the language, children being slaughtered in their beds and entire families being burned alive, regardless of whether they are Palestinian, Israeli, or indeed any other ethnicity or nationality. It's literally the point of what he's saying. It's moral consistency. It's universal humanism. 36 Israeli kids were killed on 7th of October, and that is truly appalling in its own right. While over 14,000 Palestinian children have been killed since, many of them, I would note, while they were lying in their beds, with Israeli missiles blowing up their homes. And on that note, entire families have been burned alive over and over again in Gaza. Entire bloodlines wiped from the face of the earth in just that manner. This constant attempt to smear Jewish people as anti-Semites because they object to the Israeli state claiming to be acting in their name as it kills innocent people and oppresses an entire people is just so revolting. The way he's reframing this minister, a speech based on universal humanity, on opposing any innocents being slaughtered, as something violent and hateful. But it just shows how these people rely on turning the world upside down to justify their own moral bankruptcy. War is peace to them. Love is hatred. Let's hear instead the thoughts of progressive Jewish thinkers and activists like Simone Zimmerman, co-founder of If Not Now, an organisation of US Jews opposed to Israeli apartheid, who said The Zone of Interest is a brilliant, chilling film about those who choose to tune out the horrors of a genocide happening next door, so it's unsurprising that those who are actively invested in averting our collective gaze away from Israel's genocide are losing it. The pro-Israel narrative claims the memory of the Holocaust as a trump card to say that Jews are history's ultimate victims, incapable of perpetrating evil, but also justified if they do. Never again permits all violence to stop another Holocaust. Exactly what Glazer rejects. She also adds, contrary to the lies and smears of Israel's propagandists, Glazer is part of a significant growing Jewish voice across the world that opposes the abuse of Jewish history to justify Israel's campaign of dehumanization and genocide against the Palestinian people. We are not fringe. Now, in The Nation, Dave Zirin wrote a piece entitled Jonathan Glazer's brave Oscar speech represents the best of Judaism. He refers to the well-known adage, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, but adapts it to today, though, the Zionist catchphrase could now be 1 million Jews, no opinions. Too many Zionists will brook no disagreement with Israel's war on Gaza and are willing to distort the truth to defend it. I have to say that, on that, is there any other example of an attempt to so vigorously police the borders of a minority and political grounds in this fashion? Indeed, there was a piece by the former editor of the Jerusalem Post last November which suggested literally excluding anti-war Jewish voices from the very concept of Jewishness. Now, in The Nation, he notes that Glazer was the only Oscar winner to say anything about Gaza, describing Hollywood as a pep squad, progressive except for Palestine, adding, as Jews, our tradition of debate could not be more rich. It says so much about the Poderetzers of the world and how alien they truly are to Jewish tradition that they want to take this tradition of debate and put a stake in its heart. Well, very eloquently put. Now, a few things. The Oscars included speeches from winners, the official Oscars, that is, on their YouTube channel, but not Jonathan Glazer's. I just want to add that while it's commendable that Jonathan Glazer, implicitly the 2 producers who stood by him, made this statement, I don't believe Jewish people have any special responsibility to speak out on this compared to any of the rest of us. It is, of course, inspiring, particularly in the US, how we see this new Jewish left. I feel that's very exciting personally because the left as a whole owes so much to the contribution of progressive Jews. There wouldn't be a left as we understand it without them. That's just a basic historical and political fact which has not been lost on many anti-Semites, not least the Nazis themselves. But everyone's got a responsibility to speak out. And clearly, as you can hear from the whooping and cheering, there's a lot of popularity for that stance among people who have big platforms, who can influence a lot of other people. But I think a lot of them are scared. You can see why. The huge vile attack on Jonathan Glazer is intended as a punishment beating. It's intended to deter anyone else from speaking out. So many public figures feel they should say something, anything, but then they see what happens to an Oscar-winning Jewish director, and they're like, I just can't go through with that. Well, there is safety in numbers, and they can't take us all down. I would note that many celebrities at the Oscars did wear red pins to support Gaza. Billie Eilish, Phineas O'Connell, Mark Ruffalo, Rami Youssef at the behest of Artists for Ceasefire. A statement written by them also had signatories including Kate Blanchett, Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez and Bradley Cooper. More generally, though, it just underlines what we're up against. The way apologists for this appalling crime and the root of it, the historic oppression and resulting dehumanisation of the Palestinian behave, is so indicative. Lies, unapologetic lies, that is, distortion, smears, turning reality on its head. Well, I'll keep saying it because it's true. The likes of Jonathan Glazer will be remembered kindly by history. Those who are apologists for mass murder, oppression, terrible injustice, not so much. Please like and subscribe. Do share the video. Do subscribe. Keep the show on the road at patreon.com/I'll speak to you in a bit.